3D platformers are very special to me. I love exploring environments and going through fun and varied challenges while heading for whatever my goal is. At the end of the day, it's all about going from point A to B in as fun of a way as you can. Rayman 2 and 3 are both very near and dear to my heart. Of course, Rayman did start off as a 2D platformer, released in September 1995 for the Sony PlayStation, Sega Saturn, and Atari Jaguar, made by Ubisoft when it was a much smaller and more humble studio. Michel Ancel had been drawing the character for years before it was even intended to be a game protagonist. When he was 17 and made a short demo for the French developer named Lancourt, he was able to work on the visuals for several games, including one that would be published by Ubisoft. And eventually he got to make his dream project, Rayman, which was originally going to be a Jaguar exclusive before they went multi-platform for release, which was a great choice. The Jaguar was a piece of shit. I had this game on PC as a kid, and it's really difficult. It doesn't fuck around. The art style is super fun and unique, and the music is really great, but it's never been a game I've gotten super into. Your limited lives and ability to only save in certain areas, mixed with the really tricky and sometimes confusing level design and incredibly hard bosses, makes this a game that takes a while to get into, and it's definitely not for most people. Hell, I don't even think it's for me. Rayman would eventually take his first step into 3D, first with a little short called Rayman's Training, which has become lost media since it was first shown off, as the only full upload found is missing audio. It was a short test animation of Rayman fighting a living punching bag. During this time, they were far into development of Rayman 2: The Great Escape. Originally, it was going to be a 2D platformer like the first game, but with some new gameplay mechanics and characters. But as you can see, the final result was incredibly different. Rayman 2 launched on the Nintendo 64 on the 29th of October in 1999 in Europe, and in November in the rest of the world. Since the developers were from France, I guess it just makes sense that they launched in Europe first. A PC port soon followed, as well as a PS1 port that had several missing levels and sections, which is a huge shame, but it is fully voice acted, which is cool.
Glowbox, my friend!
Are you okay, Rayman?
Not really. I feel weak and my powers have disappeared.
In the other versions, they just speak gibberish. I'm showing the Dreamcast port because it's essentially the same as a Nintendo 64 game, but with slightly enhanced graphics and a bit more content. Rayman 2 takes place in the Glade of Dreams, a world created by the dreams of a spirit named Palokus. The world is attacked by robo-pirates who come to enslave everyone, led by the pirate leader Razorbeard. Our journey begins with Glowbox being dragged into a cell. Turns out Glowbox was captured to give Rayman his powers back with a silver lung given to him by the fairy Lee. Rayman uses his power to create an opening in the vents so they can slide out of the flying pirate ship, though their exit isn't the most smooth and they end up getting separated. This flying guy named Murphy shows up and gives us a tutorial, and we're off to find Glowbox. We can move around and take in the wonderful music and atmosphere of the world. Rayman 2 has a very fun style with a lot of very angular designs and certain models being intentionally asymmetrical. It works out really well, and they make it work with the graphical limitations of the times. The game is mostly linear, though there are a lot of secrets and branching paths that lead to you finding more lumps, which are necessary to progress through the game. Thankfully, you only need a bit more than half of them, except for the PS1 version for some reason. There you need like 80% or more. The lumps also unlock minigames in between stages if you get them all. You can jump and use your hair as a helicopter, which lets you slowly descend, and you can shoot magic from your hands to fight enemies and open cages to free lumps. That's something I always found to be weird in this game. In Rayman 1, he clearly throws his fist, but they chose not to go with that in this game. Not a huge deal, but it is a little less fun. Rayman eventually finds Glowbox's kids, who are happy to see that their dad had rescued Rayman, but are not happy to hear that they got separated. He promises to find Glowbox once Lee restores his powers, but we're told that the pirates captured her too, and so we need to rescue her first. We then encounter the teensies, who just can't agree on who's the real king, and they like argue with each other and keep taking the crown. Rayman shouts for them to stop and tell him where Lee is, and they sort of just stop and look at each other awkwardly like no one wants to tell him the bad news. So one of the teensies just hands the crown to another one and he's like, hey, it's your fucking business now, like you tell him. It's really cute. They tell him that she's locked up in a pirate stronghold, and they give him a path forward, requiring 5 lumps. This is why they're necessary to collect. There'll be a few roadblocks ahead where you need a certain amount of lums. Rayman jumps in and we're on to the first proper level. I gotta say, this game still controls really well. I mean, even the swimming sections, which are all very short, are relatively fun. I think the only core aspect of Rayman 2 that hasn't aged super well is the combat. You can lock on and strafe while you shoot magic, but it always felt like a bit of a mashing game. There isn't that much to it, and I never found it to be particularly fun or satisfying. And later enemies shoot larger projectiles, which are just really annoying to dodge. Eventually we rescue Lee, and she gives us the ability to grapple purple lums, which is a mechanic I love. It just feels really satisfying. It's a great extension of his abilities. In the next level, Marshes of Awakening, we meet Sam, who we rescue, and he takes us through the level. Once we get to the end, he sheds a tear and wishes us well, and he waves us goodbye with his little tail, and he hopes that we come back to visit him again, and Rayman promises he will. I don't know why they made this scene so sad, but I find it super adorable and charming. Heading to the next level, we see a cutscene of Razorbeard, the main antagonist, who is so angry to hear that Rayman has made it as far as he has, that he grabs one of the lums and eats it, which brings the total counter of lums in the game from 1000 to 999, like you see it go down. It's such a cute little detail and I absolutely love it. Something else I love is when you're in the Cave of Bad Dreams. You have this guy named Jano who's following you. There's a section where he tries to eat Rayman and you slide away from him, but the perspective is like from inside his mouth. You see the saliva dripping down. It's so goofy, but it's so cool. This level also has a weird bad ending. Once you get to the end and defeat Jano, he says he'll give you all his treasure, and if you say yes here, you get a bad ending to the game, where Rayman just, I guess, gives up on everything and lives on a beach and doesn't save the world. It's so silly. The whole level takes place inside a weird vision that Jano is making for you. So I'm assuming the bad ending basically means that Rayman is lost to Jano's visions forever, and he's just trapped there. It's really creepy. We eventually meet up with the Teensies again, where they have now agreed on a system where they will pass the crown from Teensy to Teensy, so they can all be king, and they show us a path forwards. We have to find 4 elemental masks to reawaken the spirit Polokus, the creator of the world. He can only speak to us in his dreams, and he will help us defeat the pirates once he awakens. And that's the basic premise of the game. Explore the world, find the masks, free the lums, and your friends. It throws a few new ideas in here and there, and some work, like the sliding sections or riding the shell. Others, not so much. Like this flying section towards the end of the game, I wasn't a huge fan of how it controls, especially not the part with this laser that like drops you down if it shoots you. I got really frustrated with it. The boss fights are also pretty mediocre. None of them are particularly memorable or fun in my opinion. They're fine, they're not the worst, but they could be so much better. But really, this game is almost exclusively good shit. I love it. The world is charming, the look is unique, the music slaps, and I'm so into the tone of the story. Later games like Rayman Origins made Rayman like a weird pervert, and it made the fairies thick, and it has a completely just comedic and silly tone, and I don't really vibe with it. I'm just not a fan of how much they changed Rayman's personality, and I don't like the art style as much as the older games. I'm a bigger fan of the more mysterious and serious tone that Rayman 2 has, with a comedic aspect that fits the world perfectly. This game is incredible, and I highly recommend the Dreamcast and N64 versions of it. Rayman 2 was a success, and the franchise's leap into 3D was a fantastic one, and so a sequel was underway. However, Michel wasn't going to direct this one since he was busy with Beyond Good and Evil, so instead he would just oversee the development from a distance and give feedback. In recent years though, he has stated he was very proud of what the team created, which was Rayman 3 Hoodlum Havoc, released February 2003 in Europe on the Nintendo GameCube, and in the rest of the world in the following month. The game also received a PlayStation 2 and Xbox port. The game starts with a dark lum named Andre, going around turning red lums, which heal you, into evil black lums that turn into these weird gun-toting potato sack fuckers. I love the design of these guys. Murphy sees this unfold and tries to find Rayman, who's currently napping with his buddy Glowbox. Rayman seems to be a heavy sleeper, as Glowbox and Murphy are unable to wake him up and just have to drag him along, which causes his hands to like detach. Murphy flies with Rayman through the woods as he finally wakes up, and after escaping the hoodlums, we begin searching for Glowbox. And right away, the graphical upgrade from Rayman 2 to this game, I mean, wow. It's only been 4 years, but this game is so beautiful to look at, and I love the way they upgraded the art style. We reunite with Glowbox and get our hands back, and I'm so happy to say that we're back to throwing them. In fact, the combat in general in this game is just a huge step up from the previous game. It's far more satisfying. I love charging the punches. The look and sound design of it just makes it so satisfying. Strafing feels great. You can now throw curved punches. There's also more focus on the combat, which I personally don't mind because of how much more fun it is this time around. And the way you jump and strafe around bullets really makes it feel more like the platforming is incorporated into the combat, which you could say for Rayman 2, but I just don't think it handled it as well. I also gotta point out the atmosphere and music here. This soundtrack is one of my favorites of all time. It is fantastic. We make our way into the Fairy Council and Glowbox ends up swallowing Andre. That's the plot of the game. You gotta get Andre out of Glowbox's body and also save the world. We meet up with the Teensies once more, and Glowbox falls on top of Murphy, flattening him, and he tells us we must continue without him. And then he says,
See you in Rayman 4!
That's a fucking lie, Murphy. This fucking 20 years later, what the fuck is Rayman 4?
Also, I should mention that the game does have a slightly more goofy and comedic tone, with characters having a lot more jokes in their dialogue. This game was the first Rayman game to be fully voice acted on every version, and they really try to cram in all kinds of goofiness here. There's also this advertisement of Rayman pissing, which is it's a choice. Huge features, huh? I guess that means it's got a massive cock. We then travel to the next level, which is often done through these portals that have these weird and trippy sections where you try not to fall off while you get as many points as you can while getting to the end. Points in this game are what gives you mini games as opposed to the lums in the previous game. There are also short animations and other content to unlock as you go on. This game also has various combat fatigues. These little upgrades in a can that can give you temporary abilities. I really like these. It adds some nice variety to the game. You have the red one, which makes you punch harder, which is often used to open certain doors, and the challenge comes from getting there in time before the upgrade runs out. The green ones lets you throw tornadoes that you can use to lower platforms or take down enemies on stilts. The orange one is like a rocket, which is used to shoot targets far away. The yellow one is kind of boring. It's just a chopper that lets you fly high for like 2 seconds. The blue one might be my favorite. It lets you latch onto enemies and shock them, but it also lets you hook onto these flying things. Sadly, Rayman does not have the ability to do this whenever he wants, like in Rayman 2, but I do think it's fun whenever it's used. One thing I'm not a huge fan of are these sections where you shrink into your shoe and you try to drive into your other shoe. It's really strange, and it happens a few times. It just feels like a minor distraction to pad out the game. If it only happened once, it'd be like a funny, bizarre little event, but it gets boring after the first time. But that's a very minor complaint. I love this game a lot. It controls amazing, it looks amazing, it sounds amazing, and the story and characters are really bizarre and funny. There's so many unique and interesting areas to explore. The boss fights in Rayman 3 also take a huge step up, as they are far more fun and interesting than the previous game. Although I will say that the final boss is pretty mediocre, but it's not too bad. I want to point out some areas in this game I really love, like Land of the Living Dead. It's one of my absolute favorites. You rescue these goofy teensy ghosts that always have silly things to say.
I have to go drop the kids off at the pool.
And the music goes so hard, seriously. Another thing I love is the introduction of the Knaran, which are these hyper-aggressive species that live on the ground. They are vicious and creepy, and they scared the shit out of me as a kid. You can't attack them directly, so you gotta find ways around them. It's a nice way to add variety. Another area I love is the summit beyond the clouds. Man, it's so pretty and the music is so good. And I would play this level over and over again just because I loved the snowboard section at the end so much. You have to race at the end to rescue Glowbox, who's gotten himself stuck in a block of ice, but is still able to talk somehow. Anyways, it's great fun, and the music slaps. I know I keep pointing it out, but fuck, Rayman 2 and 3's music, it's so good. It's beautiful. So you continue going through the world to try to find a doctor that can help get Andre out of Glowbox, while you also try to find a way to return all the Lums back to normal. The areas are varied and fun to explore, and the game is just a joy to play. I really adore it. It's absolutely amazing and well worth a try. I recommend the Xbox version, especially for PAL region players, as it is the only version with 60Hz. GameCube games here usually have 60Hz as an option, but sadly Rayman 3 is not one of those games. But the GameCube version is still a great choice. You can also check out the PS3 and 360 HD re-release. It's a great way to play the game on slightly more modern systems, but it is a digital download only. The PC release isn't the best, but you can mod it to make it a lot better. And when it comes to Rayman, that was it for a long time. I mean, we got spin-offs and eventually a 2D platformer Return, which was more of a full-on reboot. We haven't seen a continuation of the story yet, and I would absolutely love to get a proper Rayman 4. To me, the Rayman trilogy is something really special. Rayman 2 and 3 specifically are just such fantastic games that deserve much more love. At least we've been able to see what Rayman 4 could have looked like, where the rabbits would have been the main enemies, but instead they changed it to a minigame collection. It's such a shame. I want more from this version of Rayman. It's such a unique world, and I would love to go back there.